Another extension of the ideas that I was thinking about, they came to mind when you talked about attention algorithms and the improvement of LLMs, for instance, ChatGPT being so powerful. So ChatGPT now has these improved attention algorithms, but we also don't want to say that it's conscious at this point. So does the AST provide a roadmap of sorts for taking these artificial intelligence programs and making them aware?
Yeah, it does. Yes, we're working on it,
You're working.
and we're working on it. We're going to try to build these things to be to know what consciousness is, to attribute it to themselves, and to attribute it to others, to people and other agents, in the same ways that people know what consciousness is and attribute it to themselves and to others. And the reason why we're doing that, even though that sounds kind of scary, is because, well, we want to study it. We want to see what the effects are in a contained way. But what I think is going, I think people are building sociopathic AI. AI that's smart, capable, autonomous, but has no idea what consciousness is, and no idea that other people have it, and no concept of social interaction or pro-sociality. It has none of the tools that evolution gave to people to understand each other and to interact with each other. So as people, we live in this sea of perceived consciousness. The people around us seem conscious. We resonate and connect with them. And when we start getting violent and unpleasant to each other, it's often when that mechanism fails and we start to dehumanize the people around us and we stop seeing them as conscious beings. And that, I think, is what we're doing with AI. We're building hard sociopaths, obligate sociopaths. They can't help it, and yet they still have autonomy, and they can still go out into the world and do all kinds of things, but they lack the pro-social tools that people have. And so this is one of the reason why I'm so interested in seeing whether we can build into AI the very concept of consciousness so that it can see it not just in itself, but in others.
Hmm. It's it's very tricky philosophically to attribute consciousness to other people. I mean, it's the problem of other minds, which, I mean, we never have direct access to other people's consciousness, but setting aside this pretty high level of skepticism, how would you determine that something with a completely different substrate from humans, like machines or computer programs, are conscious in the framework of the AST?
Yeah, in the framework of the AST, of course. Uh, well, let me go back to the example of the phantom limb,
Mm-hmm.
right? Somebody loses a limb, an arm, and their brain builds a model of an arm. And then the person says, I have a phantom limb. It's horrible. It's hurts and it's itchy. How can I get rid of it or whatever? And it lingers sometimes for years and years. Now, you can ask the question, how do you know if that person really has a phantom limb? I mean, how are you going to measure it? Are you going to put like weird electrodes in the air next to their limb and try to measure the phantom floating there? This is unmeasurable. And the answer is there is no phantom. There's no phantom. There's no physical thing sticking out of their arm. The ghost does not exist. But if you had the right information probing equipment, you could get into the brain, study the information in the networks, and say, is that a brain that's building a model of an arm? And then you'd know the answer. And so in AST works something like that. The question, does it really have consciousness, is kind of ill-posed in AST, because what people usually mean is, does it have that magic essence of experience? No, it doesn't. Neither do we in AST. We have something else that the brain simplifies and describes as magic essence. And then we believe we have magic essence. okay, does the computer have that same attention mechanism? Does it have an attention mechanism like we do? That we can answer that. We know objectively by looking at how the thing was built and how its network functions. We can say yes, it has attention just like we do. Does the machine build a model of its own attention? Well, we can figure that out. We can probe the information content in the machine and say, yep, it's got a model of its own attention. Does it use that model to deduce and report that it has a magic consciousness essence? We can figure that out too. Like all of these are objectively figure outable, right? So one can't go and point at the machine and say, we have determined it has the magic consciousness. You can never do that. It doesn't. But what you can do is say it has the same mechanisms that we have. It has attention and it thinks of its own attention as if it were a magic consciousness, the same way that we do. So you can do all of that. And the answer thus far for things like ChatGPT is no, they don't do that yet. It's totally buildable, but no, they don't do that yet.
Yeah, and it's always going to be important to be able to say you also can't do this with a human. You can't point at a human and say this is the magic consciousness. So it's an impossible threshold to meet for machines as well. You can only probe them behaviorally and look at the information processing.
And this is where I think most philosophers and thinkers and people who come at it casually make a mistake. The most common mistake of all is to say, I can't tell about anyone else, computer or person. I can only tell about myself. And the reason why that's a mistake is because actually you can't tell about yourself, because the brain tricks you all the time. You may think with absolute conviction and certainty that you have X, Y, and Z. That doesn't mean you have X, Y, and Z. And that's the whole point of this approach, the AST approach to consciousness.
No, I was going to say, the phantom limb is a great example of when somebody thinks they have X, but they don't. But are there more quotidian or examples where everybody thinks they have X, but they don't, other than consciousness being this magical essence?
Yeah. I think that if you're looking for an example where people think they have something, but they totally don't have it, that thing doesn't exist. That's very rare. It's always going to be rare because the brain doesn't bother building models of things that don't exist. It only builds models that are useful of things that really exist.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right. But if you look in the world of, are there objects that the brain represents inaccurately and then people believe in the inaccuracies, then that's pretty much everything. That's like our whole experience. And I gave the example of white light and color and so on and so on. That's just human experience. Like that's ubiquitous.